Let's go! Export of VDBs for rendering from tyFlow Zenith. So let's start by creating a tyFlow. Before I begin, why would you need to do this? Currently, we're still waiting for support from renderers such as VRay, Redshift, Arnold. They need to implement the Zenith API, and this might take some time. So until then, rendering would only be possible by exporting VDBs and then loading them into the renderer's respective container, for example, the VRayVolumeGrid with VRay. So also, other reasons why you might need to export VDBs would be to move data to other software like Blender, Houdini, Unreal, or if the RAM cache is not enough to hold the entire simulation. So if the simulation has just too many voxels or the timeline is too long and the CPU RAM combined with the GPU RAM is not enough to hold the entire timeline, in which case the RAM cache is going to start dropping the oldest frames. So in that case, you would need to save the VDBs to your storage so that you would be able to play them back later and render them with a renderer, or use type preview to capture the viewport and get an animation from that. So one other thing that I wanted to mention is that in the previous video I was talking about how the new NVIDIA drivers for the last 2 years, they fall back from the dedicated GPU memory usage. So this is the GPU RAM, this is the VRAM. When the VRAM fills up, it's gonna spill over to the CPU RAM. But there is one thing that you need to watch out for. Let me just create a bird Inferno right here, and I want to show you this option right here, max VRAM usage %. So by default this is enabled, and this is going to limit the simulation to 95% of the VRAM. So when the VRAM fills up, it's not going to automatically spill out to the CPU RAM unless you disable this. And the thing that you need to be aware of is that it's gonna get very, very slow. So the way that it's gonna work, it's the adaptive grid is gonna stop expanding. So it's gonna start creating those cubes that the simulation is cut off. It looks like a Minecraft map with those. So if you want to have the simulation spill out into CPU memory, you gotta disable this and then be prepared for a slowdown. So you gotta keep your finger on the escape key if you think that things are going too slowly. So let's go. I created the default flow. Let me just create an emitter. So let it be a torus this time, something like this. Gonna pick it in the Inferno emitter, and it starts to simulate. So this is gonna be our simulation. Let me just double check the timeline. Okay, real time is off. I can play it. That's gonna be the simulation to export to VDB. So next, I need to add an export Inferno operator. Beware that Inferno to VDB is something else. So this just converts the Zenith internal format into VDB format so that tyFlow could, for example, mesh it. So if you're familiar with Phoenix, you know that Phoenix and also the VRayVolumeGrid, they have those render modes, which by default is volumetric, but it can also be set to mesh mode, and that's that is something that could do. That you could get the same result. So you could convert the fire and the smoke into a mesh and then apply material over it and just render it as a hard surface. So yeah, in this case we need export Inferno. This is the node that is going to write VDBs to the storage. Here is the path. So of course I'm just gonna send it to the desktop like everything else. And let's generate. Inferno export complete. So now the VDBs should be generated if Windows would refresh. Here they are. So 101 VDB files starting from frame 0 up to frame 100. And then in order to load those VDBs back into the preview, into the Inferno Recall sim, I will change it to recall VDB data like this, and by default it uses the Inferno operator path. Otherwise, I could use a specified path. So this is in case I'm importing a VDB sequence or just a single VDB file from another software, or just a VDB sequence that already exists. So I could use that to point to those VDB files, and it would be loaded as if these are our own files. They could be foreign VDBs or VDBs produced by Zenith. In theory, we should be able to read VDBs produced by other examples. So I've tested it with Blender and with Houdini VDBs. And yeah, if you want me to talk about this in more detail, just let me know. For now, I'm gonna use the Inferno operator path so that we could load our VDBs back. I'm gonna refresh it, clear the RAM cache, and now the entire timeline is again cached, and this time it's loading our VDBs that we saved just now. So next I'm gonna create a VRayVolumeGrid. Where is it? Here it is. First, yeah, it asks me if I want to switch the renderer to VRay, because by default it's a scanline, it's a fresh install. Then it asks me to point to the VDB sequence, so I'm going to just click on any of those. It's gonna load the entire sequence anyway, it doesn't matter which file I click. And then I get this prompt: would you like to load a render preset for OpenVDB? So at the time that we wrote this while I was working at Chaos, we didn't know about the future existence of Zenith. So here are some common sources of VDB files. So it could be FireSmoke from FilmFX, FireSmoke from Houdini, Houdini Liquid, or Maya Fluids. So it's gonna set some options. It's gonna change some defaults so that data imported from those software would show properly when loaded into the VRayVolumeGrid. So in this case, I'm going to choose no preset. If you find out that any of those works well, just let me know, but I'm going to use just the default. I'm going to use no preset. Everything is going to be on by default. And now nostalgia strikes. So yeah, here is the old school triangle voxel VolumeGrid. When I was preparing for this video, I should have recorded a reaction video for not seeing the VolumeGrid in over 2 years. Yeah, so first off, I gotta position it at 0, 0, 0 so that it coincides with the position of the Zenith simulation. Now you can see that only the glow from the fire is visible, otherwise everything else is obstructed. So here it is. I'm going to turn off the voxel preview, no matter how nostalgic it is. I'm gonna disable temperature, smoke, fuel, RGB, and it's gone. So now here is the Zenith preview. I can enable the Phoenix VolumeGrid preview on top of it. For some reason it's not exactly the same, so the smoke is a little offset, maybe by 1 voxel. Yeah, I'm gonna keep this off, and if I render right now, I get nothing because I have no lights in the scene, but the alpha is here. I'm gonna create a VRaySun and sky. Render again, and it's too bright. I'm gonna just lower this to, yeah, minus something. Okay, and now we can start equalizing. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna use the method that I used many years ago for equalizing settings with the FilmFX caches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to equalize the smoke first. I'm going to turn off the fire. I'm just going to equalize the smoke. Then I'm going to turn off the smoke and equalize the fire. And then when I enable both, if everything is equalized correctly, we should get a proper render of the fire and smoke together. And it should look like the viewport preview of Zenith. So first off, there is no fire. So I need to go back to the export Inferno, and here are some other important options here. So first off, we have the coordinates, and by default it's Z up, and this is the orientation of the coordinate system in 3ds Max. RH means right-handed, LH is left-handed, so most software that I know of are right-handed, Cinema 4D is left-handed. Also Max is Z up, Maya is Y up, I think that Houdini was also Y up. So this way you could choose how to orient your VDB. If you choose the default Z up RH, it's gonna load fine in 3ds Max, but if you load this in Maya or Houdini, it's going to be lying on its side. So if you know which software this VDB is going to go into, you could in advance just choose for convenience the orientation of the coordinate system so that you don't have to rotate it otherwise when it arrives in the other software. Which channels are going to get exported? So we have density, temperature, color, fuel, velocity. So the units for the temperature, let's go into the VolumeGrid again. Here we can see the loaded channels. So we have the temperature, the smoke, and the velocity. Those channels that appear here are the channels that are loaded successfully. So we can just check if everything is fine. Here we have also the color and the fuel. And here there is no color and then there is no fuel, but that's okay because there is just no color and no fuel in the simulation at all. So those channels there, they don't participate in the simulation. They are not written to the VDB at all, so that's why they are not loaded. Everything is fine. But if any of those other channels are missing here, then that's going to be a problem. I'm just going to show you something important. Since I loaded everything by default, the VRayVolumeGrid still managed to recognize those channels. Here are the names of the channels that you could give them. By default, they are density, temperature, color, fuel, velocity, but you could name them any way you want. The thing with the VRayVolumeGrid is that it knows about common channel names that exist in the universe. So anytime that we've encountered any unknown channels, I've added them to the code so that we would be able to read those when I was developing the VRayVolumeGrid. So if the VRayVolumeGrid doesn't know about some channel, here you can still find it. The third-party channel mapping. So here from the dots button, and you can see that it managed to automatically map the smoke, the VRayVolumeGrid smoke, to the density channel. Here is a list with all the channels available in the VDB file. So if anything is missing, you can still remap it here. And also, for example, if you're feeling naughty, you can just swap the temperature and the density, and you can do crazy stuff here. But one thing that I want to change is that I see that for some reason here we have velocity is just the vector velocity, is the 3-component vector, while these are the separate channels. So I'm gonna map velocity x to velocity x, y to y, z to velocity dot z. So I think that this is the proper way, and everything is cool. And the reason why the temperature is not showing up is that here you can check out the range. So the temperature goes from 0 to 5, and that's not what the VRayVolumeGrid expects. It's you would be able to map this if you start playing with the render settings, but in order to make things easier, I'm going to enable the export in certain units. So by default, it's in normalized temperature units. I'm going to switch this to kelvins. So Phoenix and the VolumeGrid, they work in Kelvin. I'm also going to switch the loader to Kelvin as well. So you can see that now if I'm exporting into Kelvin, but I'm loading into Celsius, some weird things are going to start happening. So this has to be in Kelvin as well. And then I'm going to generate the VDBs again. Yeah. All right. And then render again. Just let me double check, and now here it is. So now it goes from 0 to 1582, which is the proper range. So now you can see that some temperature started appearing here, and that's good. So I think that we're ready with the input rollout. Now I'm gonna go into rendering, And I'm gonna just throw in some quick settings that are going to get stuff mostly equalized to begin with, that stuff is gonna start looking better, and then we're gonna go into more details. So first off, in the fire rollout, I'm gonna zero the physically based option. So this one just adds a hidden exponent here, so that the higher temperature gets even hotter. So when I zero this, I'm going to get just a one-to-one correspondence between what I've dialed in the curve and in the color gradient with the colors that are actually getting rendered. So the orange is gonna render orange, the red is gonna render red, nothing is gonna render white, unless I boost the fire multiplier. So that's kind of what the physically based option does, but it changes the fire multiplier per each point of the graph. So the fire multiplier gets lower here and gets very, very high here towards the hotter temperatures. So yeah, next I'm gonna go to the Inferno display and I'm going to make use of something. So here the curve and the gradient, they have their copy gradient, paste gradient tools, which you can use to copy stuff between the tyFlow user interface. But here in this menu you have VRay copy fire color gradient, and now when you do this, it's in text format. Here it is. So I can paste it in Notepad, and you can see what gets copied. And even you can change those values, copy the whole thing again, and then paste it either here, or you can paste it in the VRayVolumeGrid like this, and it works. Also, you can copy the entire gradient. That's the text format that the Phoenix and the VRayVolumeGrid gradients support. And I can do the same thing for the curve, for the opacity curve. That's the opacity of the fire. Here you can see. And also, let me just paste it first. Also beware that when you do that, it takes the data in these ranges. So if I change the ranges, copying this and that, is gonna change also just how stretched those curves and gradients are. So these are also taken into account. I can even just start by just zeroing this. Should I zero it? Okay, let's keep it by default. Let me first show you how to equalize everything as by default, and then we're gonna start playing more with it. All right, so now the gradient and the curves are the same, and I can start playing with the multipliers. But before that, one other thing is important, that the render mode in Zenith's viewport, in Zenith's Inferno display, is something similar to VRaySun's own opacity. So I need to change to this mode, and now I would be able to change the intensity of the fire and the opacity of the fire. So I can try boosting it like this. Oh yeah, and another thing before we continue is that in order to equalize the viewport with the VRayRender, I also will disable the firelights. So the firelights, they are the thing that casts light from the fire onto the smoke. So I'm going to disable this as well, so that things are initially going to look the same. So I need to increase this more. Let's make it 100. Now it's gonna show me this message because I'm rendering in GI mode. I'm gonna keep clicking OK, but I'm not gonna tell it to not show anymore, so that I could enable it in the end. I'm gonna lower the opacity multiplier. All right, and we're starting to get there. So this fire is much brighter than this one, so I can boost this even more. And here we start getting some, these artifacts are voxel sized. The reason for them is the volume white cache right here. So if I turn it off, they are gonna disappear and they're gonna be replaced by noise. So from voxel-sized artifacts, we're gonna switch to pixel-sized artifacts, which are eventually gonna get cleared. So yeah, I'm gonna keep this off for now, but yeah, eventually, if this is something that is used to help performance, it was really helpful 15 years ago. As time went by, it became less and less helpful and more problematic, but I didn't live to ultimately get rid of it and just have it off by default. Still, it helps some scenes, but there are other scenes where actually enabling this either displays those artifacts that you saw or even makes the render slower than just having it disabled. So yeah, we have something roughly equalized between the viewport and the render. So let's dive into more detail now. First off, I'm gonna turn off the fire and start equalizing the smoke. So I'm gonna change it from based on temperature to based on disabled. Now it's based on disabled. So I'm also gonna turn off fuel, fire for tyFlow and render again. Yeah, but before we go on, let me just switch from this ugly thing to something more detailed. I'm gonna simulate again with a bit more resolution. So the voxel size, I'm gonna drop it twice to 0.3. Here it is. Let me just also enable the fire exclamation mark again. Yeah, so it continues loading from the cache. Let's generate again. Export complete. Yeah. Right, so that's what I'm gonna use. Is that what I'm gonna use? I wonder if let me just try enabling PCG. Yeah, that's a bit more interesting. Right, export again. Export complete. Let me view the entire timeline. All right, so how much data is that? 18 million voxels. Cool. Okay, so let's render it. Let me just re-enable the temperature and check it again. Check, check. Right, so things are looking relatively similar. Let me just... I wonder why the viewport background is so dark. Shouldn't it have been brighter with the VRaySun? Anyway, let's go and again disable the fire. Disable this fire as well. Zoom in a little, but not so much. Yeah, maybe zoom out even more so that I could fit everything in the on the monitor. I'm gonna move this to the side even more. So I'm gonna equalize the smoke in 2 steps. First, I'm gonna equalize the alpha, and then I'm gonna equalize the color. So before I continue, in VRay it's easy, I'm just clicking alpha in the frame buffer, but here I'm gonna do this. So in the illumination, here the shadows, I'm gonna set them to disabled. Also, we can see some ambient occlusion here, so I'm gonna disable that as well. Also, we see some glow here, so I'm gonna disable that. Disabled. All right. And now finally we can see that the smoke is gray. So the reason for this is that by default, where was it? Here it is. In the Birth Inferno, the default color is gray. So I'm just gonna override it override it. Where did I override it? Here it is. Override color. I'm gonna set it to white. And I'm gonna turn off aces. Here it is. And in the end, I'm gonna change the viewport background to solid color. All right, so that's what I use for equalizing the alpha. So it looks pretty equal already. I can see that here those are a bit more transparent than those. So what I'm gonna do is equalizing the alpha is pretty straightforward. So what I'm gonna do is right here in the smoke opacity of the VRayVolumeGrid, I'm gonna decrease the simple smoke opacity. And why did I decrease it? I should increase it. 0.6 actually. Okay, so this is barely visible. This is kind of more visible, so maybe 0.6 is a bit too much. Let's set it to 0.57. Yeah, okay, but overall that's the method. So you can change this until you eyeball the result and it looks right. Next, going back to the color render, I'm gonna enable those other things here. So again, gonna enable the shadows. So here is an option for the shadows. You could use lower resolution shadows or higher resolution shadows in order to get more details. By default they're full resolution, but if the shaded preview starts getting slow, you could use half resolution and yeah, improve the performance in the viewport. I'm gonna use full resolution. Also, I can reduce the shadow step size in order to get a better quality. Wonder why that happens. Again, when I'm ready, I'm just gonna run through the video and see if anything that's bothering me is some kind of bug or some other problem. And yeah, so that's the color. Let me just also get back to aces. Right, cool. And I'm gonna disable the color override. So next, I need to equalize the color. Right here in the VRayVolumeGrid settings, here's the color. So the smoke uses constant color, which means that the entire smoke is just one color. There's no variation in the color. This one is 124, 124, 124, and the smoke that Zenith uses by default is this one. So it emits density. The default color is 148, 148, 148. So I'm gonna dial this here in order to get the same color. Right, render. Are they the same? Not at all. So the next thing that I want to do is the other thing that I disabled when I went into the I'm in the birth Inferno. So switching to the Inferno display again. Right here I disabled the ambient occlusion. So by default I think that it was 0.15. Also let me bring back the environment background. All right, so now it's white. Why was it blue before? Only the gods of software know. So the thing that we're getting here, that shading from the sky dome, it's also the same kind of shading when you're using dome white. In Zenith, we use ambient occlusion to emulate that. So by default, ambient occlusion, when it's 0, the shadows are entirely black. So in order to emulate dome white or sky, the ambient occlusion is a thing that could create that kind of effect. So I will just boost it in order to show you. It has more options here in the ambient occlusion rollout. So the distance by default is set very low. When you increase it, it's gonna take more voxels into account around the places that it shades. So increasing it, in theory, it should create like more contrast, more midtones in those shadows. Also increasing the samples and the steps should also increase the precision, but increasing any of those is gonna make it slower. So the idea is that you should run with the lowest possible values that look satisfying. I'm just gonna bring those back to 4. I'm gonna try 6. What if I try 10? Right, so you can see that if we start increasing it too much, let me just compare it with the render. So yeah, we get the same kind of thing going on here and here. If we increase it too much, so the deep creases here in the smoke, they're gonna get darker. The rest of it is gonna start looking a bit more uniform. So I'm not gonna increase it too much. I'm gonna go down to 6 meters. And I will also change the white color because here we have blue reflected from the sky and we have yellowish color for the light, so for the sunlight. So that's not quite it. Yeah, something like this, maybe a bit more pinkish. Right, and when I also disable the disable not, but just when I lower the ambient occlusion strength, I might change also the color to get a bit more white, like this. Right, so that's the way to emulate VRay's Sun and Sky or Dome White, or any other renderers Sun and Sky and Dome White. So let's just equalize the shadows. So here all the smoke is pretty dark. Here it's pretty bright. So first off, the first thing that I would do would be to reduce here in the smoke color. I'm going to reduce the diffuse multiplier. So let's slice it in half. All right, the shadows are also very dark. So in order to brighten them, so here the shadow strength, by the way, everything has two tips, so I spent a lot of time on this, and yeah, hopefully it helps make life for someone better. So the shadow strength is the multiplier for the light that the smoke casts on other objects, on other geometries. So it's not gonna help here. So no matter how I change the shadow strength, for example, if I make it 10, this should render the same. There would be no difference. So I need to change the scatter multiplier. So we have two scatter multipliers. On white scatter multiplier is a multiplier for the light from a simulation's fire onto its own smoke. So the illumination of the fire onto the own smoke of the explosion, for example. External scatter multiplier is the scatter of everything outside of this simulator. So for example, the lights. So I need to increase this so that their light would scatter more. And yeah, now I overcooked it. But now you can see that the light starts reaching the far ends of the smoke. So what can I do here? Hold on, is it not done rendering yet? All right, let's do 1.3. The whole thing is still a bit too blue though, so let me, yeah, let's not make it too red, but maybe something like this. Interesting color of the sun. Anyway, let's do that and maybe decrease the ambient occlusion a little. Yeah. Okay, so in order to match that, I'm gonna decrease the diffuse multiplier even more. What if I increase the scatter multiplier? Yeah, something like that. But yeah, it's getting too dark, so I'm just gonna make both the VRayVolumeGrids smoke white, and I'm gonna overwrite the Zenith smoke to be white again. So here, from the Inferno displayed smoke, I can override the color. I can make it white. Now we have more whiteness to work with. Okay, so that's a bit too much. I can lower it. I can, if I increase the diffuse multiplier, it's gonna get too burned out. So the other thing that I can do is change the scattering to disabled. So that's more like the model that Zenith uses for the viewport. So when it's disabled, it's gonna, yeah, it's gonna just fall off linearly, while those other two methods, they reduce the fall off of the attenuation of the ray. So now I can reduce that. Yeah, what if I set it back to 1? Yeah, so basically the diffuse multiplier controls the brightness of the forward ends of the plumes. Let me just double check if everything else is okay. So I'm not sure if the ambient, yeah, I think that the ambient white was a bit too much. So let's set it to 0.15, and now I can dial back the light color to something more something more acceptable, like this. Okay. Alright, so now I can increase the ambient occlusion, make it a bit, yeah, something like this. Alright, so going back here, let's decrease the diffuse multiplier just to make the forward ends of the smoke a bit darker. Let me just double check. Okay, I'm using cases here. And what else? What else can I do? If I use approximate for shadows, but I decrease the scatter multiplier a lot, I'm gonna get this kind of look. If I change the ambient occlusion, no, that's still the same. If I zero the ambient occlusion entirely, I get this. Right, so let's just lower the diffuse multiplier. I will increase this a little. Yeah, so something like this. So that's the workflow. So for the shadows, you need the external scatter multiplier. For the leading edges of the plumes, you need the diffuse multiplier. And there is something more. So I could, in order to get closer to what Zenith actually does, I need to also disable the GI, because the rays here don't do that kind of stuff. So that's gonna be closer to the Zenith viewport shading. So in that case, I need to change the light color again. In order to match it. Okay, so here, what I can do now is I need to increase a little the scatter multiplier because the shadows are getting too dark. Or maybe I would just switch to disable scattering. Yeah. But yeah, this way I'm not getting any ambient occlusion, so it's gonna look like this. So this way both algorithms are actually doing the same thing. So something else that I could also do is if I enable GI again, I can, yeah, let me just render it out once. Let me lower the diffuse multiplier again. Yeah, something like this. Alright, and if here I can also switch to Raytraced Scattering, which is something that the Zenith viewport cannot do. That's what you need a actual ray tracer for. So in this case, it's gonna get so much brighter than before, and also this would allow me to change the phase function in order to get the kind of shading that clouds get. So for example, if I move it forward to a positive value, it's gonna start looking moist and wet like a cloud. It's gonna start losing some of the detail here, but it's gonna start producing those dark edges on the fronts of the plumes that are characteristic to clouds. And you can see here this kind of shading and this, yeah, it really looks like wet laundry. So otherwise, if I switch the phase function to a negative number, it's gonna start looking like it's made of hard particles like dust, and that's better suited for explosions. Right, anyway, so I'm gonna switch back to approximate plus shadows, get the exposure back somewhere around -3. Yeah, and there is something else that you could do. So here we also have the covered absorption like this. I can even, ooh, yeah, I overcooked it. So let's not do it so much. So yeah, that effect can be equalized from here. So there is the smoke opacity absorption. By default it's gray, which means that all colors absorb equally, but you can set it to something reddish. And this means that the back ends of the rays are going to get red, but the front ends are eventually going to start getting blue, like in this curve right here. So that's the way to adjust the absorption. Can I make it more blue? What if I increase the diffuse multiplier? Oh yeah, fluffy. Let's make it even bluer. Yeah, blue edges are starting to show now. And yeah, there's also a way to control this for the Zenith viewport. Let's not overcook it though. What if I make this white and make this a little less intense, or a little more? Yeah, so that's how the Zenith covered absorption works. And let's get this back to gray. Now maybe I made it too Let's make it darker. Oh wait, I increased the diffuse multiplier. Let's bring it back to 0.2. And now maybe I should make this brighter in order to get the previous results. I don't remember the what the default was here. Maybe even brighter. I remember that there was a way to calculate this default value so that it corresponds to the older scenes before we changed it. So yeah, let's keep it this way. And one other thing that I need to show you before we're done with the smoke is that here in Inferno display we also have motion blur. So in order to get motion blur, you need to have exported velocity to the VDBs. So one cool thing about the export of velocity from Zenith to VRay specifically is that the velocity uses the same units. It's in voxels per second. So you don't need to do any magic when exporting it, but still, yeah, here it is, velocity. It's named velocity. We imported it as velocity into the VRayVolumeGrid. Here it is. And yeah, the typical ranges are from 0 to several hundred. These are the typical ranges for velocity in voxels per second for a fluid simulation. So when importing it, yeah, I gotta enable velocity here. So let me show you. If I first enable the motion blur, we also have camera motion blur. Let me hide all that other stuff. So here it is without motion blur. Camera motion blur is when the camera is moving. Fluid motion blur is for a moving fluid. I'm gonna reduce the shutter speed, but nothing going on. So I need to enable reading of the velocity. We're reading it as vector grid, not as 3 scalar grids. The name is velocity, and here you can adjust the velocity scale in case you're importing velocity from other software which is in other units. But yeah, you gotta you can eyeball it, or if you know them, you can calculate it. So now, yeah, I had to move the timeline, and here is how the velocity works. Here's how the motion blur works. Let me change, yeah, the scale. So by default it was 1/60th, and you can have it quite strong. And you can see here the curls and the swirls and the vortices that are forming are looking nice. So yeah, what if I make it 1/10? So that's 6 times the regular motion blur. Let me enable motion blur for VRay. I'm gonna do it from here. Camera, where is it? Motion blur, yeah. Render. With the default settings, it's not that much of a motion as much as it's just some blur. I'm gonna go here in the rendering, and here is also a multiplier which is useful when you have stuff coming from other software which might be in other units. So I'm gonna increase this to 6. So I decreased the shutter speed from 1/60th to 1/10. So now I'm gonna increase this multiplier 6 times to compensate for that. And the default motion blur is the Raytraced volumetric motion blur, and that one I and many other people were not happy with. So I added a different algorithm, the grid-based motion blur, which is still not on by default, but I was intending to switch it at some point. And that looks a bit better. So there is a difference between this algorithm and this one, because this one is in screen space. So this one should be more correct. You can see how this one kind of blurs to the side, but you can see that these directions here also kind of point to the camera. So that's the way to have motion blur from VDBs. I'm gonna disable all that. Disable, disable. Render again, and I think that we're done with the smoke. So that's the way to equalize the smoke. These are the options, and that's the workflow. Next, let's disable the smoke, show the fire, and in VRay there is no way to, so if you set the smoke cover to disabled, it's just gonna make it black. I think that there was a justifiable reason for this. I forgot it right now, but yeah, trust me. Yeah, so now what we have to do is zero this. So I just gotta remember that it was 0.57. Zero it, enable the temperature, the fire again. Yeah, we're gonna get this message. Also, yeah, let me, in order to be able to see it better, I will just disable the sky. Did the viewport die? Well, that's that's unexpectedly convenient, but yeah, it's almost okay from our just the first values that I dialed in at the beginning of the video. But yeah, that one is a little more pink. Let me try more opacity. No, that's the wrong way. So let me try less opacity. It depends on what the values are along those edges. Okay, so now the color is good, but the opacity is... wait, is that clamping before because of this? Yeah, let me try setting this to 0. Oh. Yeah, if I increase this, I'm starting to get the result that I'm getting in V-Ray. So someone or something is clamping this to... Okay, so now the proper value is this. But since I've changed those ranges, I need to copy the cover and the... Oh no, where is the window? Oh, okay. Whew, here it is. I thought that I lost it forever. I'm gonna need to paste those gradients. Now you can see that they moved a little. Move the needle. Copy and paste. All right, so now we're getting more opacity here. What is up with that? Could it be because of the... Let me put on my larger glasses. Is it because of this? Is it going below 0? Or something? What if I do... What? Wait, what? Why is it locked? Are these locked because of some of our logic back in the Phoenix days? Yeah, so that curve is not working well. So it's missing one of the handles. So maybe that's the problem. What if I cannot add points? Can I delete this point? I cannot select it even. Right, let's delete this one. Delete. No. Oh, Jesus Christ, don't crash, Max. No. Yeah, I think that now we're gonna die. Oh, god damn it. Right, let's prepare to start Max again. Yeah. Sweet dreams, Max. Unfortunately, that was the end of it. Strange thing. So yeah, we gotta check this because probably the problem is on our side. Maybe the values were not right. But yeah, so the what I was going to show you was, let me just load up the previous file that I used. But for this one, I'm gonna have to cache it again. So let me just continue from the disabling the smoke, enabling the fire, and I'm also going to open the volumetric options here. Here I'm gonna disable the smoke again, 0.53. And I'm also gonna export that simulation. So it should be pretty close to the one that died just recently. So it's a burning torus. So by default, we were using, no, let me switch to this one, because that's more interesting. So let me move this one to the VRayVolumeGrid, and we'll continue from this. Paste and copy that and paste that. Right, let's render this one. Again, fire only. Let's hide the history, I don't need it. Now here the opacity is a bit too much. Where are the settings? So need to lower the opacity of the fire. Alright, actually that's kind of good. Let me increase it a little. Whoops, not 23, just 3. Yeah, okay, so, and I'm gonna reduce the fire multiplier. Yeah, but I need more opacity for this part, so... But do I? Or should I use more fire multiplier? Yeah, and now less opacity. Yeah, again, so that's the workflow. Let me just reduce the intensity here to 1. So before it was looking like this, let's add some more colors. So 2.2, and again, in order to equalize it, so here I should decrease the intensity to maybe something like 30. Yeah, so I should lower this even more, maybe 20. And that's the way to equalize fire, basically. So yeah, just 1 second. So one important thing is that now I should have the fire lights disabled. Again, so the important things are physically based should be 0, fire opacity mode should be use own opacity, and the fire lights should be disabled. I'm gonna start getting this message. Let me switch to the fiery look. Okay, so here's something that also might need some adjustment. This handle here wasn't very well. Okay, so here we need more opacity. Or more fire. All right, even more, 600. What if I make this 0.018? All right, make this 800. It's more yellowish right here. But yeah, okay, so that's for our purposes this is close enough. So that's basically the algorithm. So you got a balance between those two. And now I can enable the smoke again. like this. So previously it was smoke, then it was fire, and now it's fire and smoke. And do the same thing here. What was the value, however? Was it 4.53? And here it is. Both of the images, now with the combined fire and smoke, kind of matched. So there is more to be desired, but if they look this close, then the previous steps of the method were right. If they're not matching, you can try tweaking it with everything enabled, or you can again just isolate just the smoke, just the fire, and tweak them a little more. Okay, let's stop this. Here's how they look. So this one is again a bit redder. I wonder whether it could be because of the cover spaces here. And also now finally I can also enable the firelights. Now at this point the fire could start illuminating the smoke. So if I render it like this, now it's something completely different. So this is something that the Zenith viewport does not support, at least for this moment. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why rendering with a renderer is still cool. So yeah, this is going to take some time to clear out. But overall, that's the method. So this is the way that I use to equalize stuff between Zenith and VRay. Let's see this one. Yeah, I made it uncomfortable for the renderer by going this close and looking at these. So also, if you want to render this kind of thin fire details, it's also good to, both in Zenith and in VRay, it's good to reduce the render step here. So that would allow the ray matching to show those finer details. Also, before I close this video, so there is just one more thing that I want to show you. So in Phoenix you had the sampler type. By default it's linear. Linear is the fast sampler. Spherical is the sampler when you want to get a smoother render. So if you see some lines and some grid artifacts, basically, you can use the spherical sampler, which is smoother. In Zenith, there are these samplers and a bit more. So the linear sampler is basically the same, but there are a couple of other samplers which do some different things. I'm looking at the wrong operator now. So we have those for the fire. So here it is. True linear is the same as linear. It's 3 because it's in 3 dimensions. Also, we have the 3 quadratic, which actually, let me show you how these look on the smoke. I'm gonna turn off the fire. Let me even hide the VolumeGrid box. Okay, so now it's a bit tidier. And smoke, here it is. So by default it's 3 linear. If I make it 3 quadratic, it's a bit, you can see that it's a bit sharper, it's a bit more detailed. And on the other hand, if you need to smooth it out, you can use this one. You can use 3 cubic spline. So if you're getting actually not noisy, but if you're getting some artifacts that are aligned with the voxels, and you can smooth them out at render time using the 3 cubic spline interpolation. So we have the sampling for the smoke and also for the fire. Where's the fire? Oh, it's not here because I haven't enabled it. But yeah, when I enable it, here is the sampling for the fire as well. So I can smooth out the fire too, like this, and it loses a bit more detail. It becomes smoother. This is also helpful in animations. If you have something, some tiny flickers or something like this, you can eliminate them using the 3-cubic spline sampling. All right, I think that was it. If I've forgotten something, I will just record another video about this. Thanks guys for watching, and see you in the next episode. Bye!